I did part of it Saturday, but I couldn't finish, so I finished today.
Garden planted.
Getting worked on right now. First of next week. Fred needs to sign it there if he does all.
Mr. Hood, we good?
The notice to say
And they're off.
it's live. So
Watch your mouth, we're live. Can't see it.
Good afternoon. This is the May 7th, 2018 meeting of the Transportation Commission. I will call the roll. Tracy Hopkins,
Present.
Ryan Lancaster,
Present.
Stephen Lewis,
Here.
Ballard's here. Ken Sawchuck is on telephone, are you not, mister?
Yeah, I'm here.
Very good, thanks for joining us. Ryan Leslie,
Here.
Ryan Hall,
Here.
David McKinney,
here.
Britton Davis. Today hooky day at school? Okay. Erica Bowen.
Here.
Luke Kavanagh. Sean Martin.
Here.
Tony Tisdale. Thank you. Ronna Gilbert. Miranda Carson. Great. Item 2, the adoption of the agenda. Any changes? Any time constraints, Mr. Lancaster?
I've got all night, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve the adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Mr. Lewis, is there a second?
Second.
Multiple seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll note that Ms. Gilbert has arrived. Okay, so the agenda is set. Approval of the minutes from April 2, 2018. Any discussion, changes, additions, deletions?
Mr. Chairman, I move
Mr. Lewis.
that we adopt the minutes as presented.
Okay, I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Hopkins, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Mr. Hood, I will sign the minutes. Old business items. Transportation projects update. Mr. Hood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. This month, the Transportation Projects Update memo begins on page 7 of your packet. I am going to run pretty quickly through that update this month, but again, if you have anything you want me to clarify or that you don't see in the memo, please feel free to either interrupt or again, this is going to be pretty quick, so at the end. On page 8, I don't know what you got going on Wednesday, but there's a public involvement meeting that you are invited to. I'll extend that invite on behalf of the Ada County Highway District for a couple of 10-mile road projects north of Ustick Road. There's 2 different projects there, but they're doing a joint open house meeting. Again, that's this Wednesday from 5:30 to 7 at Sawtooth Middle School for a couple of 10-mile roadway widening projects that they have coming up. Are actually in process right now.
Mr. Hood?
Sure.
Will that then cover there's a section of 2-lane road, so this would complete 4 lanes from Shindon to Freeway, I take it?
Correct. Yeah, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this would there's an existing improved section near Cayuse Creek on 10 Mile north of McMillan, but this would fill on both sides of that 2 miles between Shindon and Ustick and go all the way to the freeway as a 5-lane roadway. Correct.
Thank you.
Then moving on to page, I'll assume you can read the rest of it. Again, everything highlighted bold are the new updates. Page 11, did want to just call to your attention I think I emailed this to all the commissioners as well, but the VRT board did adopt Valley Connect 2.0. So there's some more information on that plan in the back of this packet, or again, I do believe I forwarded on that email to you all here in the last couple of weeks anyways. Additional links to the plan and other information. I'm gonna call that to your attention one more time. And then Idaho Avenue, Main to 2nd. This is the block just downtown here where we did some placemaking about 2 years ago. I've been keeping you somewhat up to speed on what's transpiring there. The business community, through this last winter, had some concerns with maintenance and trees or leaves gathering kind of in coves, if you will, next to the gutter, and the street sweepers weren't able to get in there, and confusing for motorists about parking and damaging cars. And anyways, we had gone forward and took that to council. The MDBA president came and made a presentation to the mayor and council just at the first of the year, asking that we ask ACHD to put the roadway back the way it was when we found it. So that letter went to ACHD. Within the last just few weeks, there's been some other folks that have said, well, hold on a minute, let's not just put it back the way we found it. Let's try to maybe even get some more parking spaces out of this deal. So, excuse me. So I've been having some of those conversations off and on the last couple of weeks, and then last Friday, 10 days ago, Friday, was at the MDBA meeting, and you were there too, I believe, Mr. Chair, if memory serves. The discussion was, we looked at really 3 different cross sections, not just the parallel parking or at the curb, which was what we had asked ACHD to just restripe it back the way it was. We also looked at angle parking on the north side of the block with parallel on the south. We also discussed doing angle parking on both sides, but to do angle parking on both sides, you'd have to convert the roadway to one way. There seemed to be some momentum for that. There was also some concern about the amount of outreach to other stakeholders. Again, the people in the room seemed to like that idea, but really this would be a surprise to a lot of folks if it just happened with the upcoming, I remember Josh corrected me, is it micro seal or some type of treatment that's going on that block here soon. To do a full-on change the traffic patterns downtown, some concern about reaching a bigger audience to make sure this is the right thing, kind of thinking it through a little bit more. Anyways, long story short, well, story's not fully told yet, but just to keep you up to date, a letter was sent from MDBA on Friday to ACHD Commission President Sarah Baker, asking that instead of putting it back the way it was, we'd really like to have further the conversation about angle parking on this block. So I received an email from Josh Sack today. He's going to try to make it out there this week, look at it, see what can fit, see what they can do. So again, more to come. Just wanted to let you know ACHD's maintenance forces are still planning on going out there to kind of put it back. If you've driven out there in the last couple of days, I didn't pay attention this morning on my way in, but late last week, they were obliterating some of the blue. There's cones out there, trying to get it ready for what we're talking about. So I don't want to go too much into that, but just a quick update again. So it's a transportation-related thing. So I just thought you all should know that that's the recent conversation. So with that, again, Mr. Chair, you were there and have been part of some of those conversations. So anything else you wanted to?
More than fair summary, and I got the sense that there is some momentum to make it one way with the angled parking. I was surprised by that discussion, but I think that's where it's headed. But we'll see, and if anyone else wants to weigh in on that, Mr. Hood.
Not on that item, Mr. Chairman, but I do have another question.
Yes, Mr. Lewis, okay.
If I can go back to the bottom of page 9, the Cherry Lane pavement rehabilitation. I thought I had received a postcard at home saying that was going to happen in April and May, April/May. I guess that's not the case anymore.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Lewis, this was, I received an update last week from ACHD, so this just came out of there. I don't know what if it was, I don't recall if it was previously slated to be earlier, so just part of their capital maintenance program. I believe they have like 180 days from when they start to complete work on several segments throughout Ada County.
Okay.
So I don't know if anyone else can speak to the spring timeframe or right now versus what's in the memo. I just basically cut and pasted that out of the update that I got because that was one of the segments in that list.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Hood? Mr. Hood, I have one question on Pine Avenue, Meridian to Locust Grove. On the western end, there's been some questions or discussion. Is that part to be finished sooner than the remaining section to address some of the congestion downtown?
Mr. Chair, it's a good question that I don't know the answer to, but I can jot it down and find out. I'm not attending those meetings either, but we do have Al Christie is the city staff person that is in the know. So I'll look into that and report back to you.
Thank you. Anything else for Mr. Hood on item 4A? Okay, we'll close 4A. 5A, Meridian Police Department Status Report, Sergeant Arnold. You brought a guest? And you brought a guest?
I brought a guest, yes.
Or support?
Say what?
Or support?
I don't know how much support he is, but
Well, maybe backup, because you need a partner, right?
yeah, just
Well,
my,
welcome.
my partner in crime.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Lieutenant Brown. He's one of the patrol lieutenants.
Lieutenant, thanks for joining us today.
He's been involved in some of the meetings that we had with ACHD on the school zone issues, so I invited him today to maybe he can speak to some of the things that we see also.
Very good.
When we get to that topic, the only other thing that I really have to talk about is the speed studies for River Valley and records around the park and down even further to the north to U-Stick and even past that to Bald Cypress. It looks like those came back. I don't know if you guys have seen the results of those yet. It was suggested by ACHD that we increase the speed limits to 30 miles an hour in that area. Most of the cars were between 30 and 35 in that entire area, which we would be in support of if you guys deem that necessary whenever you get a chance to review those.
I haven't seen that, but is that, so that's where the project is headed?
That would be our recommendation, yes, that we increase those speed limits.
Okay.
We can go down there pretty much any time between about 8 o'clock in the morning and 10 o'clock at night and catch people going between 35 and 40 pretty consistently. Commissioner Lancaster had stated that sometimes we turn people into lawbreakers just because we don't have the right speed limits set in place, and I think that kind of applies in this situation.
Okay.
Most of the cars are over the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit just to begin with.
Very good. Questions for Sergeant Arnold? Mr. Lancaster?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't think we've seen the results yet, but I did notice that in our meeting minutes from last month, and I presume that, Sean, you'll bring those sometime, and we'll look forward to those.
I think Caleb is
Oh,
looking them up. I thought I sent them to Caleb, but I'm trying to remember the.
they got buried in the pile. Okay,
Yeah.
well, all right. But I appreciate that report, and Sergeant Arnold, I hope you'll stick around because we may ask for your input or your partner's input on the school zone stuff too, since
We'll be here.
we were involved with that discussion last month. So, yeah, I appreciate your update and being here.
I'll note it's not senior skip date. Mr. Britton has joined us.
All right, anything else? Great, thanks, I appreciate it.
Very good. Item 5A. Shall we move on then to school zone design? Tim Kearns, ACHD.
So, Mr. Chair, maybe as Tim is getting ready to go, just a quick refresher, I think it's in there, but you've talked about this last month, and really 3 different speed zones were brought up, as well as, the design, mainly what I gathered from refreshing was the length of those. Standardized lengths or lengths when they may be cross an arterial or a collector roadway. What's an appropriate length as well as signage. So anyways, thank you, Tim, for coming and my presentation TC overview.
Welcome, Mr. Kearns. I don't recall seeing you before, but then again, my memory is maybe a little slower. So tell us a little bit about yourself, sir.
It's been a long time since I have been here, and when I was here last, I was actually sitting on the other side of the row there. So,
Well, thank you.
Been with the Ada County Highway District for about 5 years now, and doing traffic engineering. And before that, I was actually at Meridian Public Works. So, always nice to come back.
Well, thanks for coming in today.
And Mr. Chairman, if I can add, yes, Tim was right. So once upon a time, he and I were traffic safety commissioners together before this Transportation Commission existed. So I'm the only holdover, I guess, Tim. So
He's retained a little more hair.
he has, and he's got more on his face since then too. But
All right. School zone design memo attached.
And I'm just kind of doing a high-level overview and giving you a little information to start with on kind of what feeds into school zones. And if there's anything in there you want to know more about, let me know. But otherwise, I'll just keep moving along. So, school zones, I'll talk a little bit about kind of the laws and the guidelines that go into this, and walk routes, which feed into this as well, and then the school zones themselves. So the MUTCD, as you've probably heard before, we call the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. It's a big, thick manual. It has a lot of good information in it, though. A lot of research goes into what's in that manual that helps us make good engineering decisions about how to operate our roadways. Also, the Idaho state statute that I've listed there is an important one because that, I don't recall exactly what year that came into being, but it's not super old. That actually spells out the requirements for new schools when they come in. And this is important because some of the older schools have equipment out there or maybe still need equipment. We're still kind of dealing with those. The new schools, as they come in, they have specific requirements in state statute about traffic studies they have to do to determine what kind of traffic control devices they need to install. And then lastly, AAA actually has a school safety patrol operations manual that we refer to a lot that has some great information in it. So MUTCD, like I said, it's a federal publication from Federal Highways. It's adopted by the state of Idaho, so we're obligated to abide by it. It gives us guidance and standards for different traffic control devices, signs, stripes, signals. And it has a specific section that just tackles school zones. And I put a little quote there about kind of what the intent is. And it's really about uniformity, striving for uniformity, because that's when we get the best understanding from motorists on what we're trying to convey to them. A few things, this is my little soapbox, that are not traffic control devices. And the reason they're not traffic control devices is because they don't really give a driver a good idea of what they're supposed to do. If I see slow and I'm already going the speed limit, what should I slow down to? So these are things we do not put in the right-of-way. And I mentioned that Idaho state statute there that has requirements for new schools. It basically requires them to do a traffic impact study for the school and to determine if new crosswalks or signals or sidewalk connections or whatnot may be necessary for that school to operate safely. And school speed zones we do get with new schools when they are needed. So walk routes, within walk zones established by the school districts, we look to set up walk routes specifically to try and funnel kids into a route that's got good sidewalk connectivity, leads them to guarded or controlled crossings, and minimizes their potential crossing conflicts. So that little example I put there is from Paramount, and you can see we've got the crosswalk striped on two of the legs, but not on the west leg, because we're always trying to funnel kids into one crossing. We don't want them kind of going every which way if we can help it. I mean, children, we all know, aren't the best at following directions, but we try to give them what they need. And you don't need to get too involved in this here, but we also have some guidance from a study that was done. We call it NCHRP 562, and that helps us determine what the best crossing treatment is for these different crosswalks, whether they are just signs and stripes or if they actually have a signal associated with them. And school crossing guards are very, very important at our different schools, mainly elementary school, but we do sometimes have them at middle schools. They are not, traffic control devices is kind of a discussion point we get into a lot. Traffic control devices like signals and things and school zone flashers aren't meant to be a substitute for a good crossing guard, because the crossing guard's really watching out for the kids and helping them to determine when the safe time is to cross, and also making gaps in traffic for them to cross. So now getting into the school zone part of it. The school zone sign there, we call the S11, that fluorescent sign you see on the roadways. That's to warn drivers that they're approaching a school area and they should be expecting school-related activity. And that's really the main function of that sign, is just saying, hey, you're coming up into a school zone. Precedes crossings or the school zone flashers. And in Idaho, there's actually state law that has special fines for infractions in school zones, and this establishes what that boundary is. Now, the school speed limits, we place those within school zones. The manual tells us that the minimum should be at least 200 feet in advance of a crossing location or wherever we're expecting students to maybe be entering the road, such as like a drop-off area where parents are pulling over and letting kids out, and they may be entering the roadway, or a crosswalk. Sometimes we do that with just passive signs, the ones that say when children are present, but we try to avoid that since it has some ambiguity associated with it. So generally we try and use the school zone flashing amber beacons with these signs, because that really gives drivers a clear indication of, when you need to start obeying this speed limit. So I brought a couple examples. I understand you've got a few you want to go into in specifics, but I just brought a couple that come up frequently. One of them is Cherry Lane in front of Meridian Middle School, because it is kind of a longer zone. I just wanted to highlight kind of where things are and why they are the way they are. So those little blue dots on each end are where we actually have the flashers set up. And a couple things to note, you might be thinking, well, why do we have the flashers so far apart? The crosswalk's right at 8th Street where the signal and the crossing guard is. But we actually have a couple breaks where those red arrows are in the fencing, and middle school students, being middle school students, they like to trickle over and go out of those and cross as they are headed over to the library. So the zone kind of covers that whole activity area and where we see the crossing. And just as a side note, we do have a project programmed here in a few years to establish an actual crosswalk with pedestrian hybrid beacon, push the button, stop traffic down at the library so that the students can cross there. Meridian Elementary School, this one's a little bit different. We actually have, as you can see there, about 675 feet from the crossing at Carlton up to where the northern beacon is. And it's a little bit of a holdover from before Meridian Road was widened and we didn't have that pedestrian hybrid beacon. We had more, it was just a 2-lane road and we had lots of crosswalks along there. So because conditions have changed, we are actually looking at this one to adjust it and to move the beacon south closer to the Carlton crossing. But that's just a little kind of background on how it got to be the way it is.
And how far down does that one go?
Let's see. After Carlton, I think you've got 2 blocks to Pine, is what I'm thinking. So it's a pretty long zone. But actually down at Pine, we do have a crossing guard there that crosses the kids across as well. And this crossing at Carlton, when we've observed it, we get elementary school students, we get middle school students, we get kids going the other direction towards Cole Valley, I believe. So it gets kind of a mix of students there.
There's also Boys and Girls Club there. So that's
Yes, and also the Boys and Girls Club. But this is a zone we do think makes sense for us to shrink. So we're working with our in-house crews to determine whether or not this is something we can just do easily in terms of moving the equipment. But that's just kind of the quick run through, and I'm sure you guys have some questions, and that sounds like maybe some other school zones you'd like to talk about. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Questions for Mr. Kearns?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Lancaster.
so I brought this topic up last meeting, I think, and Sergeant Arnold had some thoughts on it, and I just want to clear the air. Mr. Baird asked me after our last meeting when I got my ticket along Meridian Road, and for the record, I have not received a ticket for speeding in this school zone. It's an observation made on the, from a transportation commissioner, that's all. So Tim, we had talked last month about Meridian Elementary School, Meridian Middle School, so you talked about both of those, and Rocky Mountain High School, which was another long school zone. And we've talked about some of these school zones at various times. We've asked Sean questions and whatnot. And I guess a question that I'll ask you, I think I've asked it of Sean before, but I'll ask it since you're on the hot spot right now. But I guess, are there some formal, ACHD design standards for schools? For instance, Rocky Mountain is a high school. Are all high schools
Sure.
signed as school zones? So, that's an example. But or are there policies like no high schools are signed? So, anything like that. Do you have any written policies in place other than what you've referenced us to in other places?
Sure. We don't have anything hard and fast per se when it comes to what grade levels we do school speed zones for. In the past, high schools generally did not have school speed zones associated with them. And then my understanding is kind of as the area has grown over time and the roads have gotten wider and busier and faster, we've started implementing those at certain high schools. So I'm like a good example is I think it's Centennial at Cloverdale and McMillan does not have school zone flashers, and to date I don't think we've even received a request to install any. But Rocky Mountain High School, kind of as Linder got busier and the development started filling in on the west side of Linder Road, we started getting more student crossing activity. Kids darting across 5 lanes of traffic, and the speeds are somewhere between 40 and 45 miles an hour normally. So then it became something that we needed to address. So I guess in short, no, we don't have anything that says like we will for sure do this at every high school, but it's become something there's become more of a necessity for it over time.
So are there, I mean, in the office, are you guys talking about developing some standards that way then? Or you just do it case by case whenever there's a request?
It really is case by case for addressing schools that already exist. As we get new schools, the traffic impact studies that are required by state statute are addressing that. We're reviewing it and determining if, what the necessary traffic control devices are.
I know another discussion that we've had at times is why 20 miles per hour? And I think the best we've been able to come up with in our discussions is tradition. So
Yeah,
do you have any
I think there's
guidance that way?
is some tradition with that. I mean, it's most school zones I think you'll find in urbanized parts of Idaho are 20 miles per hour. Out on like kind of the fringe areas, like I know Middleton in front of their high school, I think their school speed limit drops from like 45 or 50 to maybe 30 or 35. So it's not unheard of to have something other than 20, but I think for the most part in these urbanized areas, that's kind of the de facto standard.
Well, most school zones in Idaho are probably in Ada County, so, a good chunk of them anyway. Those were my questions for Tim. I think I'd like to continue this discussion. I'd like to get Miranda's input, perhaps ask Sergeant Arnold some more.
I will say, if I can add real quickly, when it comes to the 20-mile-per-hour school zones, most of the ones that we go out, periodically we get requests to do radar speed studies, just like we were talking about with River Valley and Records, to just kind of see what people are doing. And for the most part, we get pretty good compliance with the school zones. There's always the folks that aren't paying attention or that are intentionally speeding through, but I would say on the whole, we get pretty good compliance with the 20-mile-per-hour school zones.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lewis,
if Mr. Lancaster is done, I'd like to ask a question or two.
for now, he's done.
Yeah, for now. I'm done.
So you talked about the spacing of the zone in advance of the crosswalk, 200 feet plus. I'm assuming that's dependent on the posted speed limit, what that advanced speed is. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. There are cases, we do have some school crossings on fairly high-speed roads, 45-plus miles per hour, where we've put those further back to give people more time to react and slow down.
But the measurement is from the crossing, correct?
Correct.
Upstream, okay. How about downstream of the crossing? I've noticed that a lot, or all the school zones around here, is that the zone won't end until the incoming traffic has their point of beginning.
Yes.
So my question is, when a driver has passed the crossing, he's got 300, 400, 500 feet of continued a school zone, but no conflict.
And part of that is the consistency, and we like to put the back flasher, we call it, on the back of the pole, that single flashing beacon that lets you know you're at the end of the zone. Mm-hmm. It gives us a way to do that. But part of it too is that guidance in the manual isn't just referring to the crossing, it's referring to like the actual school zone and frontage where school crossing activity could occur. So it's kind of it's kind of that full length. So it's really set up to be ending right where that incoming traffic is, as you were just observing. Mm. We're kind of telling people, if you're coming in from this direction and you're going to need to slow down, then the people coming the other direction need to be doing that speed until they get to that same point.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hopkins.
Mr. Kearns, something Sergeant Arnold brought up last month, and that is people coming into the school zone from side streets or where they're not aware they're in a school zone. At least that's their take on it. Is ACHD aware of that happening and trying to address that?
Yes, Mr. Hopkins, we've actually met with Meridian PD, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, I think, on that specific topic. And there are some locations that are more problematic than others where we're looking to see if we can supplement those side streets with some additional signs. Putting flashers at every single side street becomes, quite a burden to do, but there may be some locations where we can improve that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Are there questions for Mr.
Chairman?
Yes, Mr. McKinney.
Just a couple of brief questions. First, can you give us some sense of recent history of auto pedestrian accidents in school zones? What do we have? What kind of information can you give us in that regard? I'm just interested simply because wondering, do we have a problem that we know that we're trying to solve, or is this simply we're trying to prevent problems? And obviously, of course, we do want to prevent problems, but what information do you have that you can give us?
Mr. McKinney, I think, fortunately, I think incidents are fairly rare as far as collisions occur. They do happen. I'm trying to think of the last one I can remember us discussing was probably, I'm going to say Compass Charter, maybe on Cherry Lane here a few years ago. And so for the most part, we recognize that, being in front of the issue is better instead of being reactive. So we really like to get these in place when a school opens, especially with the new schools. And just because, especially with the lower grades, kids are, they haven't really developed that sense yet of being aware of their surroundings, so the potential for a crash is a lot higher. And so we really like to be out in front and get these in place. But we do have some older school areas where as issues come up or traffic levels increase, for instance, we look to go put something in place. But I'm not sure I can remember much recently as far as specific crash incidences.
Okay. Let me just ask, I'm sorry.
Can I speak to that real
Sure.
quick? I know at Meridian Middle School, just at that location, the principal has reported a couple of incidents where students are crossing to the library I've only been with the district 4 years, so in the last 4 years, there's been a couple of incidents crossing to the library. There's also been a couple of incidents on 8th Street of kids coming from the east and using a crosswalk there. I think there's been 3 incidents on 8th Street of students that were bumped by cars. I'm not gonna say they were hit by a car running down the road, but they were bumped by cars. So I don't know every campus because they don't all tell me, but Meridian Middle School has reported 4 or 5 incidents in the last 4 years.
And that crossing I was talking about to the library that we've programmed, that's a direct result of some of those reports we've received from the school district.
When is that crossing likely to be installed?
I want to say it's due for construction in 2021, so it would be designed probably the year or so before that. So in the next year or two, we should begin design on it.
Okay.
And we had announcements every single afternoon reminding students not to cross there. And we sent letters home reminding parents to remind their students. We did everything we could to educate the students, but they do what they want to do. Even when you look at, should there be slower traffic 200 feet past a crosswalk because the kids have already crossed? At an elementary level, they see grandma walking to the corner and they just run out and meet grandma. They don't wait till they get to the crosswalk.
Right. Okay. Just one other quick question. And this relates to an earlier comment. One of the issues I think that needs to be taken into consideration when we look at the length of school zones is that when you have a speed reduction to 20 miles an hour, now the headway between cars shrinks dramatically, so that vehicles coming from side streets and trying to get onto a main street or make a turn, essentially all the gaps in traffic are gone. That's one of the challenges that school zones present, is that they eliminate gaps on the major road. And that can have a follow-on effect of, perhaps, increasing frustration of other drivers and encouraging some unsafe maneuvers because the gaps are all gone. And that's at least one consideration when it comes to deciding where to end a school zone. Anyway, just a thought.
And that's a good thought. It's really a balancing act of, trying to determine what we really need in order to make sure that, the area where the crossing activity or the drop-off and pickup activity is occurring is covered, but still not be so long that it becomes difficult, even just for drivers, in your attention span as you're going through that distance, to forget that you're in a school zone and start accelerating again. So definitely a balancing act.
Yeah, thanks.
Other items, questions for Mr. Kearns?
Mr. Chairman, I might have more later, but I'd like to ask some questions of others for a little while. So if Tim, you can stay on deck here, and not, you can sit down. Well, I guess it's up to Mr. Chairman if you can sit down, but I am fine if you sit down, but would prefer that you don't run off quite yet.
Well, we'll address that when it comes up, Mr. Lancaster. Mr. Kearns, appreciate you coming in and having a conversation with us and presenting information.
Absolutely.
As always, you're welcome to come back.
Thank you.
All right. Very good, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lancaster.
may I ask, so I had requested of you, Mr. Chairman, and Miranda provided this, so we have a handout here with I understand this is the walking areas for these 3 schools, And I was hoping that we could talk with you a little bit about that, Miranda. Perhaps you can tell us what we're looking at, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lancaster, yes, because we had we adopted a rule earlier to interject, but if you would, trying to get the right terms, if you would review the bidding for us, so to speak, to where we're at in some issues, because we've talked a lot. We've discussed a number of issues about school zones, so, and maybe you are, but and my question is, what specific issue are we going to take up here?
Yeah, so thank you for that clarification, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for helping keep me on task. So we brought up these 3 school zones at Meridian Middle School, Meridian Elementary, and Rocky Mountain High School, and so I had asked you, Mr. Chairman, if Miranda could bring these so we could talk about where are the students actually walking from to the schools. And thank you for asking that clarification. I guess that's the question I'm interested in and trying to answer is, where are these students coming to and from?
So can we have Ms. Carson remain at her
That's
station,
fine
or
with me. No, I think she's got a microphone, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not trying to take over, Mr. Chairman. I apologize if I am, but I've just given this topic some thought.
So you're okay.
Okay, yeah. I voted for you as chairman for this year, so.
So everything in the orange is where students are coming from, and I apologize, I should have put the schools on there. So Rocky Mountain High School is there between Cayuse Creek and Deer Crest, east of Linder. So you're looking east of Linder, south of Cayuse Creek, and north of Deer Crest, right there where he's got the mouse. That's where Rocky Mountain High School is. Everything in orange is where students are walking from.
Mr. Lancaster, any of your questions, are you concerned about zones at the school or farther out into the subdivisions?
I guess in the vicinity of the school zone. So at this one, I understand it's a little south of Deer Creek to north of Cayuse Creek. Is that where the school zone is here?
I'm not sure exactly where the school zone is for Rocky Mountain High School. I think it was just put in a couple years ago, but I'm fairly certain it runs at least from Cayuse Creek to Deer Crest.
Or Deer Crest, yeah. Okay. And okay. I guess
and you have a lot of business there as well with Sonic and Dutch Brothers, and I believe there's one other that the high school students are even going and parking and then walking back out and going and getting breakfast at these locations. So it's not even just all traffic one way. The kids are coming back out and going down the sidewalk or crossing over at different locations to go get their breakfast at Sonic and Dutch Brothers before they go to the high school, so they may not be utilizing the lighted crosswalk, but instead going and crossing further south to make sure they have their morning coffee.
I was going to say something about that, but I'll save it, yeah. Okay, so do you have any idea or feel for how many students cross in this area?
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head. I can get those numbers if you want me to do some sort of presentation on that, I definitely can, but I don't know off the top of my head. I know that if you went out there and just stood there and watched, there's a large volume of walkers in the summer when the weather's nice. And they're coming from both neighborhoods, to the east and to the west. So.
And this is a relatively new school zone at Rocky Mountain, as I recall. I mean, I know we've talked about it here in this commission.
Yes, I think it just went in last year or the year before.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify.
Bush.
So this is like almost a half-mile long school zone? Is that what we're talking about?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. McKinney?
I happen to live very nearby and drive through this school zone frequently. I believe it begins just north of Deer Crest, and it extends to probably like at least 200 feet north of Cayuse Creek. There aren't signs, as we've discussed, there aren't signs from cross streets, so that drivers entering Linder Road from cross streets may or may not be aware that it's a school zone. But as far as pedestrians crossing the street, there's a lot. So, but we have a full signalized intersection at Cayuse Creek, and then not at Deer Crest, but at the street that's north of it. It doesn't seem to be, it might be Divide Creek. I think it's Divide Creek Street. There's a signalized pedestrian crossing right there. So there's two crossings on Linder Road, one north and one south of the high school, which I don't see many pedestrians. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen any pedestrians during a busy hour trying to avoid the crosswalks and cross the 5 lanes of Linder Road outside the crossing areas. They might do it during, other times of the day. But there are a lot of pedestrians, an awful lot. So I would, probably over 100 crossings at least each morning and each afternoon.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question of Mr. Kearns?
Sure.
Quick? Is it ACHD policy to put reduced speed school zones through signalized intersection crossings?
Mr. Lewis, so we don't have a policy per se that says this is where we install school zones, but we are trying to kind of heed the guidance of the manual as far as bracketing those most concentrated crossings, whether they be signalized or not. We don't cover all of them. The zone ends short of McMillan, and there's student crossing activity there as well. But these are the most concentrated school crossing locations, so that's really what we're trying to cover.
It's my opinion, that reduced speed school zones probably are not needed through signalized intersections and all-way stop intersections. Of course, at uncontrolled intersections, you have to have them, and at pedestrian hybrid beacons, probably. But that's just my opinion.
Okay. Mr. Lancaster, you had Rocky Mountain. We also have Meridian Middle School and Meridian Elementary School. Particular questions there, sir?
Well, I guess just the same thing from Miranda as far as, well, I don't know. I guess the map is quite helpful, so thank you for bringing it. A question about Meridian Middle School, though, if I can ask, is Miranda, you talked about how the principal here has reported several incidents, and to me it was notable that you only mentioned the Meridian Middle School principal. Is there something different about Meridian Middle School? Is there something different, about the school or the students, or is the principal perhaps more sensitive? I'm not saying good or bad, just saying is she perhaps, or he or she perhaps more sensitive to, student crossing issues for some reason? Just what makes Meridian Middle School different than the rest of West Ada School District?
So I would definitely say the principal is reporting it. I'm not sure if other schools are experiencing it and not reporting it. We don't have any district-wide way to capture those kinds of student accidents that happen off campus. We really only have student incident reports that happen on campus. I would say, though, at Meridian Middle School in the surrounding areas, there's going to be less sidewalks and probably more narrow shoulders than at other places, so students may be more used to walking in the streets to and from their neighborhood parks, and they're not paying as close of attention. I know that we have students also, because Meridian Middle School isn't one of those, it's not one of those schools that you see the school sitting on the corner of the walk zone. It's the school is central to the walk zone, whereas some schools you'll see the school is in the corner and all the kids come in, and then there's other school zones. So we've got kids coming from every direction onto Meridian Middle School, so there's more areas of conflict there as well.
Okay, thanks.
Lancaster, is there a particular ask or with this additional information, is there some direction still to move, or?
Yeah, I guess my last question for you, if we look at Meridian Elementary School, so this one does appear to be different than the middle school or the high school in that the school zone, if I'm recalling this right, is on Meridian Road. And according to how I'm reading this figure that you gave us, so there's no, I guess all the students out east of Meridian Road are bused or attend a different school?
So we do look at the age of a student. Everything, the railroad is there south. Cherry Lane, we don't have elementary age students crossing Cherry Lane, regardless of whether there's lighted crosswalks or not. Typically, when you're looking at a major road, unless there is a crossing guard, we're not going to have elementary age students crossing it. And we're not going to put crossing guards usually that far out from a school, as far as Linder or Cherry. Meridian Road is just a busier road in the morning, so we don't have kids crossing. As far as how far the Meridian Elementary boundary extends, I can look it up real quick, but I just brought the walk zones with me.
Okay, and that's fair. I guess just what I'm asking is, if I'm looking at this right, it appears that there's no students that attend Meridian Elementary School that cross Meridian Road.
No, not unless their parents just choose to have them cross Meridian Road and walk rather than catch a bus.
Okay.
Which is the case in some places. We have kids, Mountain View is a good example. We have kids that don't want to wait for the bus, so they walk. Cross places that aren't necessarily safe, but they would rather not wait for the bus. So.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for humoring me. That was helpful to me. I guess here's a thought that I've had, Mr. Chairman, that I want to propose to you and the commission is, from time to time, we do talk about school zone issues here and more specifically here in this meeting. I guess before I get too far, if you'd like to hear from Miranda or Tim or Sergeant Arnold, I would certainly like to hear more of their thoughts. But as I've thought about this since I proposed this agenda item last month, and as I've thought about it in preparation for this meeting, I think the proposal that I'd like to make to you and to the commission is perhaps it would be beneficial to form a school zone committee or subcommittee. I can't remember how the ordinance is worded. And I guess my purpose in that is so that we can talk kind of in a more informal setting. Sometimes it's hard for us to have discussions in this formal, very large setting where we invite people to the podium and things like that. So I guess that's my proposal to you. Somebody likes it. Well, I guess I'd like to propose to you, Mr. Chairman, that perhaps we could form a school zone committee that meets kind of as needed to talk about some of these issues. So I'd be interested in hearing more about ACHD's design details or their discussions about shortening the school zone on Meridian Road near Meridian Elementary School. And looking at this map, perhaps there's reason to have a discussion about removing that school zone altogether. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I think this could be, having a committee that met kind of more informally, not, in the council chambers, could be helpful to have some of those discussions.
I think there's a couple procedural questions. I'd ask Mr. Baird, within this commission, we are a public forum. Would we be allowed to form that committee. And then number 2, I see at least 1, 2, and 3 groups that probably already have discussions about school zones. Probably with hat in hand, I'd ask if they would want extra members showing up in their discussions.
Mr. Chair and members of the commission, I think I saw Caleb running to the screen when the topic came up. And I was going to do the same thing, and I probably should before I fully answer your question, is what does our bylaws say about subcommittees? It may have some specific guidance. If it doesn't, there's still nothing to prevent you from creating an ad hoc committee that can meet with less than a quorum of folks and report back to you some recommendations or findings. So let me pull up those bylaws, and I can kind of let you know when I have that information. But it might make sense to maybe have Mr. Lancaster and some other folks come back with a specific recommendation for the committee on what the subcommittee would do, what it would be charged with, how often it would meet, just so that you'd know what's under consideration for creating that. So those are my thoughts at this
You want to take that offline to another just informal conversation?
If Mr. Lancaster agrees that it makes sense to come back next month and make a proposal, then yeah, I can kind of help guide you what buckets to put that in. So does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fine. That sounds great.
Okay.
And
Mr.
maybe
Chair.
one of these groups would invite you to be part of their discussions, Mr. Lancaster. And I say that with all sincerity, that trying to get you invited to another committee.
Mr. Chair, if I,
Ms.
if I
Carson.
can just offer my opinion real quick.
Sure.
So I do agree that we need to make sure that the distance that a school zone is effective so that people aren't losing focus and they're remembering that they're in a school zone. I don't think that we should just say high school students don't need school zones. I'm working very hard to make sure that all of our special needs students are working at their least restrictive environment, which in some cases means they can walk to school. We're working very hard to make sure that those students understand where to get on buses so that they can use public transportation, and we're working within these walk zones to pick them up. High school students, just because they're high school students doesn't mean that a 9th grader has the maturity to know where to cross. They may have been going to an elementary and middle school that they've been riding their bus since kindergarten, and now they're suddenly having to walk and they've never had to do it before. So I would be very cautious in saying high schools don't need walk zone or don't need flashers just as a blanket statement. I do think that I would also be very cautious to say we need really rigid policies. I think what ACHD is doing is great in considering everyone. I can tell you they don't approve everything we ask for either. It's not like we ask for a school zone and we get it. We've been denied before on where we wanted school zones. They do take the time to go out and watch the traffic, the foot traffic, and make determinations based on what they think is safe.
Okay, very good. So, Mr. Lancaster, to button this up, we're left at you contacting Mr. Baird or Mr. Baird contacting you and joining in other people, or what are your thoughts there, sir?
Yeah, I'll come back at our next meeting with, I guess, a more well-developed idea of this committee that I'm proposing.
Okay, ball's in your hand.
Okay.
All right.
Mr. Chair, if I can, I know you're
Yes.
trying to button it up. I have it here, so I'm just going to read it to everybody real quick. This small section of the bylaws on subcommittees. The commission chair, with the commission's approval, may establish such subcommittees as necessary or helpful to assist or advise the commission in the performance of its functions and/or furtherance of its mission. Meetings of subcommittees shall comply with any and all applicable public meeting laws. Each subcommittee shall consist of at least 2 commissioners. Unless a subcommittee chair is appointed by the commission chair, each subcommittee shall elect a chair to preside over the subcommittee. The commission chair, subcommittee chair, or mayor may appoint citizens or public officials to serve as members of the subcommittees as well. So that was the take there. Just real quick, since I have the floor, I'm going to just show you So Miranda brought the walk zone for Meridian Elementary. Also found during the conversation on the school district's website the actual attendance boundaries for Meridian Elementary School. So that's the yellow that's in the middle of the screen there. So the walk zone, quite a disparity, right? And the discrepancy between what's the actual walk zone and the attendance zone for Meridian Elementary this last year. So anyways, just wanted to put that in context a little bit. Just because you're not in the designated walk zone doesn't necessarily mean kids aren't walking to or from school, right?
Sure.
We know that, so.
Sure.
Anyway, so I just wanted to provide that, have copies of it. I couldn't find it very well online, but I had a printed off copy, so.
Within those guidelines, then, Mr. Lancaster, you'd be putting together a proposal that fits within that bylaw? And it'd be happy to, well, I'll just open that up if anyone else on the commission here would like, says 2 or more, it sounds like.
At least 2, yep.
At least 2.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be interested in serving on that subcommittee.
Okay, so we have 2. Anyone else? Okay. Let's see your proposal in the June meeting then.
Very good. Thank you,
Look
Mr.
forward to
Chairman.
that. That's, appreciate that, Mr. Lancaster.
And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the discussion that we've had with the various agencies and the commission here, so thank you.
Very good. You had asked to retain Sergeant Arnold's present. May he be released?
Unless you have something more to ask of him.
Okay. School's out for you, sir. Thank you, Lieutenant. 5B. Thank you, Mr. Lancaster. 5C, new comprehensive plan update. Mr. Hood.
Mr. Chair, just a minute to update everybody. It still remains on item 6D under future meeting topics because there'll be more to come in the coming months. But I just wanted to provide everybody with a status update on how the new plan is progressing. So late last month, the city selected Logan Simpson. They're out of Collins, Colorado. Or they were a responsive proposer to the RFP we had for the city's new comprehensive plan. They actually have Kittleson as a sub working for them on the new comprehensive plan. We haven't fully vetted out the scope of work yet, and they aren't under contract yet, but in the coming weeks, I anticipate that happening. We'll bring that back to council later this month and hope to have them under contract. Just as a refresher, so a couple of things that we're really asking Kittleson or Logan Simpson, Kittleson through Logan Simpson to deliver would be this master mobility map and some of the elements in the comprehensive plan that talk about cities, future network working with other agencies. And again, we've talked about this months ago. I think in September when our tour was, we kind of floated this concept of this group largely serving as another subcommittee that's really focused in on the comprehensive plan. So I just want to provide you that update that things are coming. We have a steering committee that some invites have been extended for about 20 members to serve as a bigger steering committee. But I'd use largely this body as a subcommittee that really looks at the transportation elements within the comprehensive plan. So kickoff will probably be later this month. We're trying, if we can get them under contract, to do something when the Hill, the YMCA, and the groundbreaking on May. It's a Friday. Big ribbon cutting and community party down there at the new South Meridian YMCA and the park there by Hillsdale Elementary with live music and all that stuff. So we're trying to do something for the rest of the community to let them know, hey, and we're kicking off this new comprehensive plan project that'll go on over the next year. There's more to come on that. Just wanted to provide you all with a quick status update on that project.
Any follow-up for Mr. Hood? 5C, we'll close for now. 5D, staff communications, Mr. Hood.
So this is one, I think, in particular, I believe Commissioner Leslie on page 13, or the beginning on page 13 of staff communications. I think just last month, the request was made, and I have still added it to the list for prioritization next year. So when we come up with priorities for next year, as we discussed, I've still done that. I did want to just provide you that update. Mr. Kearns just left, but from Tim about the Settlers Park crossing at Meridian Road, I believe it was brought it up.
Right.
So there's just a quick update there.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask for a reminder of Meridian Road, and was there a particular crossing at Settlers Park? I don't remember our discussion. Or was it just anywhere between Meridian Road along, or, yeah.
Wanted a formal one, as I recall, wanted a formal one.
On the north of Meridian Road and U-Stick, I think.
Correct.
Those residences.
Correct. North of U-Stick on Meridian.
Okay. I don't know if you guys heard Mr. Kinsachuk. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. I just was asking for that clarification.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Hopkins?
Sean, I know that you guys went out and looked at it and said there's not enough people making that, but at different times of the year, i.e. baseball and soccer, that gets to be way different look than it might have looked this Saturday, or the Saturday you were out there looking at it.
Sure. Excuse me. Yeah, we looked at it one day out of the year. Not to say that a different day might not have different results. Just the day we looked at it.
That's usually when, so I used to live at Meridian and almost Chinden, so I would drive through that area, and if it was soccer season, I would go any other way. Because people will park all along that northeast side of the road, and then just filter straight across, no crosswalks, just pretty much flood the road. And now that U-Stick's changed, I don't know that that'll still be a problem, but Meridian Road, you see that quite a bit. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents in that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So just a quick question for Sean is, if it is only one day out of the week where it's really the high volume, and that volume met your threshold or your criteria for installing something, would that be, but it's only one day, would you still consider doing some sort of facility for pedestrian crossing?
Sure, if it's just one day, but it's a Saturday, but it's a Saturday for 3 months out of the year, I think that would still qualify. It doesn't have to be every day, Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday.
Right.
Realizing that a park is probably going to see the peak usage on Saturday mornings.
So would it be possible for you guys to go out when there's when there's spring flag football season or baseball's going on right now? When did you go out again?
I want to say like 2-3 weeks ago. We did it during a weekday and then a Saturday as well.
And did you notice if there was any sporting events going on?
I think soccer was going on at the time.
It was? Okay.
Any further comments, questions on the staff communications?
Mr. Chair, I'm not going to read them all to you, UC Valley Connect. I do want to just follow up with the 3 individuals that your appointments are going to be ratified or reestablished. So hopefully they aren't having second thoughts about serving that additional term, because that resolution is coming up here, I believe next Tuesday. It's on the agenda. It may even be tomorrow. So welcome back.
Groundswell for a mandate, Mr. Lewis.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I did have one more just in reviewing that too, and I don't know if Miranda, and we did already release Sergeant Arnold. I forgot this was in the packet. But if Miranda doesn't mind, you do have at the top of page 15 another issue that she asked to just be put under communication. There was a string of communications that went back and forth that I was copied on and was asked to include this in.
My apologies, Ms. Carson, if you wanted to involve Sergeant Arnold.
So it's fine. So just looking for a little bit of advice here more than anything, so it can be something that I just kind of throw out there and we can come back to at another meeting to actually discuss, or if anybody could just email me suggestions. At Rebound High School, which is a very small school, they have 2 pickups. They're high schoolers, so they're not really being picked up. They have 2 incoming times and 2 outgoing times throughout the day. So they have 4 times the kids are crossing the street there. there's not, the only parking is along the street, along Water Tower there. There's not a crosswalk. We've requested a crosswalk, but we don't have enough kids to get a crosswalk. The problem is that being such a straightaway, even though the speed limit is low, people do tend to speed down Water Tower. They pull out down from the west end, and by the time they get to Locust Grove, they're going pretty quick. So rebound being there and the students coming out and crossing with that traffic. Some of the students speeding, I'm sure, are the high schoolers that are parking further down. Some of them are coming out of these businesses down here, as reported by the principal. I personally went out and observed it, and it was scary to me to see those kids just descending onto the street with no direction of exactly where to cross. Because there's not a crosswalk, it's just, they just descend on the street. The speed is low, but because there's so many cars parked on the street, the kids aren't looking around the cars really before they're going. The cars going up and down aren't necessarily following the speed. I don't know if, I don't know what the suggestion is for a fix. I just know there's a problem. I don't know if it would be speed bumps. I don't know if it would be obviously lowering the speed limit. It's not going to be a popular idea at this commission. But I don't know what the solution is. I just know that I don't feel like my students are necessarily safe being picked up and dropped off there at Rebound because there's so many cars parked along the street and so many cars going up and down that straightaway, not following the speed limit.
Ms. Carson, maybe we ask Mr. Lancaster that this be on his things to do on his committee that he's going to propose.
Yeah, definitely. I would love for it to be.
Yeah, you guys are making my case for me already. This is fantastic.
You have some homework before school starts.
As long as the committee is not just anti-school zones, then then we're good.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lewis.
I did
Oh,
look,
yeah, you're on the committee too.
hopefully, yeah.
Okay.
I did look at this before the meeting in Google Street View. I have a couple ideas.
Yeah.
A water tower in this segment is not striped at all. There's no pavement markings. So I think the first thing I would do would be to add the double yellow line and the shoulder stripes, because that in itself can help reduce speeds to give drivers visual clues that they what their boundaries are. Second, about the school buses stopping in the lane of travel to pick up and drop off. That's a huge no-no.
And
So-
there's nowhere for them to stop because it's all street parking. There is a fire hydrant on the east side of the driveway that one of our buses stops there to drop off. The other one pulls up to this walk path that's coming out of the school to pick up, so that students are walking out.
Well, I think on the north side of the street in front of the school's front door, we could certainly put some time of day, no parking signs. So between the hours of pickup and the hours of release, we could have that be a no parking zone and have it as a bus bus pull-off area.
I do like the pulling off before the driveway, just because then the bus isn't competing with the student traffic, and students aren't crossing student traffic to get on and off the bus. But I wasn't sure with there being a hydrant there. I know it's no parking because there's a hydrant, so there's no cars parked there. But I wasn't sure if the bus is actually allowed to be pulling in there. You're stopping for 3 minutes. You're not parking. The bus never parks and leaves. The driver's always in the bus. But I really wasn't sure if they were even allowed to be doing that. Are they allowed to pull up along the curb and have that as a designated pickup and drop-off point with there being a fire hydrant there?
I'm not sure if in front of if the driver stayed with the bus at
The driver
all
never
times,
leaves the
that
vehicle.
probably shouldn't be a problem.
So I can direct my pickup and drop-off to be at that location, and that's fine. But there's still the issue of these students that are crossing the street to get in their cars, or crossing the street to walk down to get in their cars that they've had to park further down Water Tower because we don't have enough parking at Rebound.
Something else, just in Google Street View, I couldn't find a speed limit sign anywhere near here. so perhaps people don't know it's a 25-mile-an-hour road.
Yeah, that's where I don't even know what the speed limit is.
So-
And I drive down that road frequently. I just go slow because I don't know what the speed limit
Unless
is.
otherwise posted, it's 25.
Yeah,
All right.
I don't know if maybe we can get more
That's true, but-
signs.
but that's not generally known, I guess, even though it should be.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can't they just get
Yes.
a bigger police department sign up?
You would think with the police department being right there, which is why I
Yeah.
sent it to Stacy or Sergeant Arnold first, because he's our neighbor. I thought he might have some
Yeah,
insight.
they could enforce it for you.
But,
Doesn't have to go far.
and there is somebody out there every day hollering at the kids, but it doesn't make it, not from the police department, just from the school, but it doesn't make a huge difference when there's not actually a direction to tell the kids to go.
Well, the Lancaster Committee has some work to do.
30.
Okay. Very good. Thanks, Ms. Carson.
Thank you.
30, there it is, right there.
Oh, 30.
Any other comments?
Oh, 30, there you go.
Okay, we have 5D completed. 6, future meeting topics. Any to add? Well, we've got, yeah. In June, Mr. Lancaster's coming back with a subcommittee proposal. So, any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, I believe
McKinney?
the packet also included a suggestion about canceling the June meeting of this commission. Am I mistaken on that?
So, Mr. Chair, yeah, that's item 7 is a discussion, and I
sorry.
talked to legal about that, how to post it on the agenda without presupposing we're going to cancel the June meeting. So I assume there's no more future meeting topics, though. So yeah, at the next meeting, Commissioner Lancaster will come up with the proposal for a subcommittee. If there's no other future meeting topics, so here's what's going on for June. As soon as school gets out for the year, I'm taking my family away. So I'm not here on June 2nd. So that's really what it boils down to. If you all want to meet, that's fine. I just won't be here. I can probably even put a packet together if you want to meet. It does provide some logistical concerns on my end. So it's easier, but we can accommodate if you have just pressing issues and you want to meet on June 2, that's fine. I can't be here. So that's really what it boils down to. So our next meeting would then be July 2, which I realize is near a holiday. So just making sure we have a quorum then, so we don't miss multiple meetings, 2 meetings back to back, then that does become quite a bit of time in between our meetings. But that's where we're at. I'm on vacation. So.
Okay. Is there, Mr. McKinney, is there a motion there?
No, actually, I'm fine whatever way it works out, so I don't know that I have any particular preference.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I know we've traditionally sometimes skipped one of the summer meetings, so we're not doing things very differently than we have.
That's true.
I just want to know, if Mr. Hood can take us with him. I want to go to Disneyland or wherever he's going. Yeah,
Far, far away.
far, far away.
All are welcome. We can't probably house everybody in the condo, but yeah, you're all welcome.
In the where?
Never mind.
Clearly. it's
Did
under
we want to move the
wraps.
July meeting to the 9th and cancel the June meeting?
Motion.
Well, I'm just,
Or is there a discussion?
cancel the June meeting, move the July meeting from the 2nd to the 9th to get away from that 4th of July week, because it's right in the middle this year, so.
Later in June too, to split the difference a little bit there. I think we can make, there's other options. I was just trying to keep it simple, but if that works better to get away from the holiday, do it the end of June and
I like Ryan's suggestion.
I'll make a motion for that. Cancel June meeting, move the July meeting to the July 9th.
The one point of discussion, if I may, in times past, is if this room is available on the 9th, that Monday at 3:30. Mr. Baird's going to look at a calendar.
Assuming it's available, I'd second the motion. I'd second it anyways.
Well, We're going to know in about 2 seconds.
Your mission.
Mr. Chair and Mr. Lancaster, I won't be here on July 9th, so if you need any input for your committee, if you can just let me know beforehand.
Mr. Chairman, Miranda will be in touch
Okay.
before school gets out. How about that?
Okay, well, I'll be working all summer. I just have 2 weeks that I'll be off.
Well, that makes one of us then.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lewis?
I'm assuming that if there are no pressing issues that would have been discussed in June. Is that correct, Mr. Hood?
I didn't have anything. In fact, I'm assuming just, and I did coordinate. I know Tony probably doesn't have Lisa's calendar in front of her, but we're planning on doing, so Communities in Motion 2040 2.0. We were going to get that update in July, and I told her the 2nd, but I'll assume that she can make the 9th work. I don't have anything pressing for June necessarily, so that's why I proposed to cancel it. If there was something, I could staff this with somebody else and make the meeting go forward, but there didn't seem to be anything warranting that meeting.
Like a true attorney, he's giving no indication of his answer till he sits down.
Yes, excellent. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I did check with the city clerk's office, and the chambers are available on July 9th. However, at 5 o'clock, the MIAC group begins to meet.
That's right.
So, you know, you've been able to get your meetings done by 5. Take that risk, you know, squatters' rights, you know,
Okay.
out in the hallway, right? And another option, of course, is to start at 3. But depending on your motion, I told Clerk Barb in specific that Caleb or I would follow up with her on what you moved to.
Okay, so we have a motion to cancel the June meeting, move the July 2 meeting to July 9. Assume, Mr. Hopkins, there'd be an amendment to that to time limit from 3:30 to 5 p.m.
Or we could start at 3. I don't know what everybody's,
It's your call.
on the July 9th meeting, we'll shorten that from 3:30 to 5.
Okay. Is that, we still have a second on that, Mr. Leslie?
Absolutely.
Okay. Any further conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So we've got a vacation in June. We'll come back here on July 9th at 3:30, and we'll have your homework project to look at. Thank you, Mr. Lancaster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
See you in July, gentlemen and ladies. Brad, I'm gonna hang up on you.
Okay. I'm gonna go grab a sample ballot.
Yeah.
So do-